Hello guys, how are you all doing? So today we are gonna see, what if Luffy ate dark fruit, part 2, so let's begin the video. I can't believe you. Even after I told you how much Zoro hates pirates, you're still planning to recruit him. Scoffed Kobe. The wanted pirate and marine hopeful had been floating for almost a full day. It was fortunate that they'd taken off early in the morning because they weren't exactly geared for a long voyage. Kobe had to fend off a voracious Luffy from eating all their rations with one of the oars, and by fend off I meant pass some food using the oar as a spoon, so he wasn't tossed overboard by the ravenous teen in his bid to reach the grub. Needless to say, he only had one oar left to steer with. Fortunately, despite his less than human eating habits, he still had the capacity of a normal person, and could only eat so much at a time. God forbid if he was one of those big eaters he'd heard fruit users could be. I'm hungry. Where's dinner? My king. You just ate an entire herd of manatees. So what? I'm hungry, so that means it's dinner time. Or do you want to see how you look covered in marinara sauce with an apple in your mouth? More food. Right away. The man with the bow on his back ran to find his king more to eat. Munch, chomp, gulp, rumble. Lone captain, can we eat now? Asked a clearly starving man rubbing his stomach while eyeing the feast and a half they'd made for their leader. Munch, no. If you eat any, then there might not be enough for me. You'll eat when I'm done. But captain, we're your crew. We need food. You can't expect us to go to Gaba. Said the infant in men's clothes before bursting into tears. Anyone else feel like whining like babies? The captain. A collective shaking of the head let the lady captain turn back to her meal. By the way, I think Helmsman Dobbs needs changing, she said while cramming a turkey leg in her mouth as her men backed away from the smell. I didn't say I wasn't listening. I just want to see if he's a good person first before I decide if I want him in my crew. I tell you about all the stories I heard about what a monster he is, and you still want to see yourself, and you tell me you've been listening. Kobe thought sarcastically. Luffy for the last time. Hirano Zoro is a demon made of flesh. You so much as say you're a pirate, and he'll kill you before you can say anything else. Wow. If he can kill a guy before he says another word, I definitely have to ask him to join the crew. Luffy said with stars in his eyes. Sigh, he absorbs everything, but words. Kobe muttered. Fortunately for his sanity, it only took another hour to reach the Navy base town, or unfortunate depending on your point of view. Luffy jumped out of the lifeboat and ran off to take in the view, leaving Kobe to tie the boat to the dock. Wow, the marine base. The Yomi boy said happily. I can't believe we got here. Well, of course. Basic navigation is a necessity for all sea travel. Unless you want to just float about the ocean forever. Let's eat, the pirate said, and ran off in a random direction in hopes of finding a restaurant. Kobe stared after the dust cloud looking down into the boat where their food supply had once been, now only bits of string, wrapper, and a splintered oar. He bit his lips and looked back in the direction Luffy went in. If being a marine means I'd have to fight guys like him, then maybe I should just be a vegetable farmer like mom told me to. Kobe found Luffy in a restaurant called Food Fu. Ordering something for himself, the two sat at the table eating their last meal, as friends. Luffy sighed and patted his stomach contentedly. Well, Kobe, this is a town where we parted ways. You do your best to become a great marine, okay? Touched at his friend's words, Kobe wiped away his tears and nodded. Thank you, Luffy. You just remember to be a great pirate. No problem. But if I'm gonna be king, then I expect you to be an admiral by the time I am. Or better. Kobe gaped. An admiral? They were the best of the best. Only taking orders from the fleet admirals of the world government themselves. Did Luffy really have that much faith in him? As Kobe was dreaming, Luffy was thinking out loud. I wonder if Zoro is still being kept at the base. Crash. The two of them whipped their heads at the sound. Tables being flipped over, dishes crashing to the floor, meals half-eaten covering the wood and staining the crumpled tablecloths. People had flung themselves against the wall furthest from Kobe and Luffy as possible, staring at the two with abject horror. Luffy, Kobe whispered. I don't think you should mention Zoro. Anyway, I saw a notice out on the street. Lieutenant Morgan is in charge of the base. Crash. Everyone who had only just started to peel themselves off the wall and clean up were back against the wall staring at the two. There. Let's just leave, Kobe said, grabbing his friend's arm and pulling him complaining out the door. A few seconds later he peered back through the door, seeing everyone clean up again. Morgan. Crash. Kobe stared at the people's plasters against the wall, before dropping his head in defeat. I get the feeling I'm the only sane person I'll ever know. That was great, laughed Luffy while he and Kobe headed towards the biggest structure in town, the Navy base. This isn't funny, Luffy. Zoro, I could understand, but why would they act the same way to the lieutenant's name? I don't know. Maybe he did something bad, Luffy said simply. What? That's impossible. Why? Just because someone's a marine or a pirate doesn't mean they're always good or bad, right? Kobe wanted to say something against that claim, but he really couldn't fault his friend's logic. Nor did he really have time to, since they had now reached their destination. The marine base was unbelievably ugly. It had 4 normal-looking buildings, and 2 that looked like upside-down flower pots that had been painted in zebra stripes. A large gate with the word Marine painted on it separated them from their dual objectives. Luffy slapped his companion on the back. Alright Kobe. In you go. Remembering the reactions of the townsfolk to the Marine officers named Kobe, wasn't in a hurry to go in. I'm not really prepared yet. I can't just go in and ask after all. Shrug, suit yourself, he said before reaching up and latching onto the top of the wall, hauling himself up till he got a good look over it. Now let's see where that monster is. You won't find him like that, Luffy. He's probably locked up tight in the base. As usual, Luffy didn't listen to the pink-haired boy and hopped down, moving to another section after he spotted something at another part of the base grounds. Hopping back up onto the wall further down, Kobe could see a wide smile cover Luffy's face. There he is. Come see. Kobe gulped, but complied. Curious as to how the monster identifies himself. As soon as he peeked his head up, he fell back onto his rear. His face is a picture of terror. That bandana, the evil aura. Knew no doubt, it's Zoro. Even as obviously injured as he was, anyone who knew his face would be terrified of this man. He was tall and muscular, wearing a white t-shirt that outlined his physique briefly, and black trousers and brown boots. The green sash around his waist had a brown rope around it, which secured him to the post he was tied to, in addition to the rope wrapped around his arms on a post parallel to the one his waist was tied to. Held him in a sort of crucifixion. So that's Zoro. Those ropes don't look too strong. I could break them easily, said Luffy. What? Don't even joke about that. He could kill you. Hey. Kobe's head snapped around at the sound of an unfamiliar voice, only to realize that the confident yet wary voice came from the feared pirate hunter. It was unbelievable. He was filthy, looked exhausted, and had blood both dried and new smeared around his mouth and coming down from his head. Yet for all this he was smiling. The way his bandana shadowed his eyes gave him an evil look, and the smirk on his lips like he was saying, I could still kill you. Could you get over here and untie me? I'd do it myself, but my arms are asleep from being tied like this. Luffy just continued to look at the guy. Kobe was half ducked behind the wall. I don't have any money, but I'm a bounty hunter. I'll find the biggest bounty in this blue and give it to you. I'm a man of my word. Luffy looked to be seriously considering it. Luffy doesn't. You can't trust him, he'll kill you as soon as you untie him. Nah, he can't kill me. 'Cause I'm strong too. He's hopeless, cried Kobe mentally. Turning to their right, they see a little girl on a stepladder holding a package in one hand. She hopped down on the other side of the wall, completely unafraid of one of the most dangerous men in the least dangerous ocean. Zoro looked down at the little girl with passive interest. You lose something, kid. She shook her head cutely and unwrapped the package, showing 2 large rice balls. I made some rice balls for you, Oni-san. Since you haven't eaten in a long time, okay. Go away, kid. The girl looked hurt, but was still determined to give him the food. Please, leave me alone. Get lost or I'll kill you, he snarled. Well, that wasn't very nice, a snubby voice called out. Flagged on either side by burly men in marine uniforms, was the kind of guy most people would beat on reflex. A fine black suit with spotted cuffs, a gold chain, and a ring on the hand which wasn't seated in his pocket. If that wasn't stupid looking enough, then what about the fact that his hair looked like someone had taken a bowl to it and then slapped on 3 full bottles of gel to give his blonde hair a perfect oval shape. This was the base commander's son, helmet hair Helmeppo. Kobe sighed in relief. Strangely, as the guy looked, the 2 marines on either side of him told him that he was someone important to the marines. Zoro scoffed at the pompous guy. Well, if it isn't the lieutenant's bastard son. Don't get cocky, you damn criminal. My dad is the lieutenant of this base after all. I just said that, you ass. Helmeppo gnashed his teeth, but managed to turn his attention from Zoro, walking up to the little girl and speaking in a patronizing tone. Why, hello, little girl. They look tasty, he said right before grabbing one from the girl's hands. Stop it, she said with tears forming in her eyes. Kobe grew confused. She didn't cry when Zoro threatened her, but she did with the marine commander's son. What was going on? Helmeppo ignored her and took a big bite right before retching and spitting the mouthful out. That's awful. You're supposed to put salt in these little twits, not just sugar. But I like sweet things, so I thought they'd be yummier that way, she said sadly. In response, Helmeppo snatched the other one away and stomped both the whole one and the partial one into the dirt angrily. That's so cruel, said Kobe, who was in a state of disbelief at the behavior of Helmeppo. There. Now the ants will eat them. Ha ha ha. The girl started to shiver and shake, the tears becoming that much harder to hold back. Helmeppo spotted that and groaned. Give it a rest, you brat. It's your own fault for being here. See this? He pointed to a sign conveniently placed next to him. It stated anyone found aiding a criminal will be charged with the same crime. Signed, Lieutenant Axehand Morgan. He grabbed the child by the shoulders and stared right into her eyes with a sinister look. You know my dad, right? Big guy, not too nice to lawbreakers. You're damn lucky you're not an adult, otherwise I'd have my men kill you. He tossed the girl back to the ground and talked to his men. Throw this brat over the wall. Ha. But she's just a. Helmeppo was in his face in an instant. Don't dare talk back to me. Or do you want me to tell Dad you were going against orders? No sir. The Marine then grabbed the girl, and with a mighty heave, threw her over the wall with a yelp, forcing Luffy to jump off to catch her, making him fall on his back. As Kobe was checking the girl for injury when she got up, Luffy got up and peeked over the wall at the scene. Seeing Helmeppo resume his aloof attitude and striding right up to Zoro. Well, you're still alive. I didn't think anyone would have this sort of endurance. She chuckled. Tell you what. If you stay alive for an entire month, I'll forget about your little indiscretion and let you go. Have you better keep your word? Zoro growled. Haha, don't worry, I will. See you in just over 2 weeks. With that he strode off in some direction followed by his flunkies. Good luck. Zoro wasn't focused on the helmet-headed idiot anymore. He was too busy staring a hole through the teen who just jumped over the wall. What are you doing here? Well, I'm looking for people to join my pirate crew actually. Zoro looked at him for a second before breaking out into a twisted grin. Wow. I didn't think anyone, as young as me, would give up on life so soon. Kinda sad. Hey, I haven't given up. It's my dream. What's wrong with that? Let me guess. You heard about me, so you came to free me and make me join your crew. Right. Luffy scratched his head, forgetting he was wearing a coarse straw hat. I haven't decided yet. Since everyone says you're a bad sort of guy. Smart look who's talking. Listen up and listen well. I will never join you. Understand? I don't need you to help me. I know for a fact that I'll easily be able to survive for a month here. Food or no. I have to live to fulfill my dreams. Luffy stared at the older teenager, a smile creeping up on his face without notice at the talk of dreams. Well, if Zoro's dream depended on his being tied to a post for a month, thereby permanently damaging his arms so he can never use his sword again, then he was gonna let him do it. Alright, if that's what you want. He turned to leave. Although if it were me, I think I'd starve to death in a week without food. Food? Hey wait. Luffy turned back to see the prisoner looking down at the mess that used to be handmade rice balls. Can you help me eat that? Kobe, who had finished helping the girl, watched from a distance. Sweat dropped at the swordsman's request. The rice balls, which had once been white, triangular, and sticky, were now flat, muddy, and had a small footprint on them. You sure? You'll probably get sick. Just give it to me, he said, and opened his mouth, as wide as he could. Luffy shrugged, and tossed it into the waiting guy's mouth. It was quite comical to see the previously baddest criminal with bulging cheeks, and sweat breaking out all over, washing away the dry blood. His head shook violently, as you could see the mass he tried to force down his throat, as though he was swallowing a sea urchin whole before it reached his stomach. That cough told that girl Boik that those were the best rice balls I ever had, he said while still looking like he'd eaten something jagged and poisonous. Luffy just grinned. This was all the proof he needed. He ate it all. Really, the delighted girl asked Luffy after they had returned her to her house. Yep. And he said he loved it too, replied the boy. Gee, I can't believe someone with as bad a rep as Zoro could really act like that, Kobe said. The girl spun on him and stamped her foot indignantly. It's not his fault. She looked down at the ground. It's all my fault he's stuck there. People are only afraid of him because of what he did for me. Helmeppo used to have this pet wolf. He'd never have it leashed, just letting it run around, biting people, and doing whatever it wanted. The day Zoro arrived on the island was the same day the wolf wanted to try and take a bite out of me. I shut my eyes as hard as I could and hoped it was a dream. But when I opened my eyes, Nissan was standing in front of me, with the wolf cut in half, and Helmeppo running back to the base, crying to go get his dad. Wait, is Zoro's in trouble because he stopped that wolf from killing you? The girl nodded. Kobe added his thoughts. It makes sense. Why would a bounty hunter, as notorious as Zoro, suddenly be a criminal? They're the ones who stop the bad guys after all. The only bad guys are the Morgans. They're like tyrants, and execute anyone who doesn't obey them. What creeps, said Luffy. Put your head back down or I'll tell my daddy. The sound of that nasally voice could only come from one person. They looked to see Helmeppo walking down Main Street like the town was his. Everyone had been forced about at the little creep, under threat of him running to his dad. He eyed the crowd, eager to remind anyone of what he'd do if anyone disobeyed even a little. That's right, stay there. Unless you want to end up a dead man like that idiot Zoro. What does that mean? Snapped Luffy, causing everyone else to cringe at the latent disrespect the Straw Hat Boy was showing the commander's son. Helmeppo looked over at the fisher boy with mild disinterest before deciding to humor him. I plan to have that freak executed in 3 days' time. Isn't it obvious? Tufts of sinister darkness started to spring from Luffy, like the boy was bursting into flame without any fire. His knuckles tightened enough to make an audible crack. The only ones who could see it were Kobe, and the girl hiding behind him, and the Marines who were moving to shield Morgan's brat. The rest were either pressed to the ground or had their eyes closed in a vain expression. I thought you said you'd free him if he lived a month. The tone turned as dark as the flameless smoke rising from him. Like anyone would believe that. I was joking so I could see the bastard's face when he's put to the Marines didn't move in the way soon enough. How could they when instead of Luffy rushing the helmet-headed brat, Helmeppo instead flew towards Luffy's outstretched hand. What doom? Dispelling the swirling dark energy on contact. Luffy drew his fist back and, much to the horror of everyone there, sent it speeding into the younger Morgan's face, making him fly through the air like a bullet and crash into one of the buildings, leaving him indented in the wall out cold. Luffy, do you realize what you've done? Screamed Kobe. I've decided on Kobe. Hirano Zoro is going to be mine. Said Luffy with finality in his voice. The street turned eerily quiet, save for the few chunks of brick and plaster that fell away while the Marines were peeling Helmeppo Morgan off the wall he had smashed into. Everyone was too busy looking at Luffy with abject horror. You hit him. You hit him, yelled one of the terrified townsfolk. Lieutenant Morgan is gonna turn him into hamburger meat, cried another. As the Marines roused the blonde Ponce from unconsciousness, Luffy was determined to put him right back under. Raising his hand before Kobe grabbed him from behind. Luffy, please don't make this worse than it already is. You will really upset the Marines. I don't give a crap. That bastard deserves it, said Luffy, trying to break his friend's grip to continue his attack. Helmeppo rubbed the sore part of his face. He'd been hit. Some little peon actually had the guts to brave his father and hit him. This would not stand. Not even his much feared father had ever hit him before, and he was a monster. How dare you? Nobody hits me. Not even my father. I'm telling. It was the most terrifying yet immature thing anyone had ever heard. Everyone scrambled to get as far away from Luffy and Kobe as possible for fear of being seen with them. Tell him what? That his kids are wusses who have to run to daddy. Why don't you fight for yourself, you little wimp? Helmeppo snorted, not at all bothered by these normally demeaning insults. You'll regret this. When my father hears what you did, he'll execute you himself, he said before having his marine flunkies carry him back to the base. Oh, I guess you can't always knock sense into idiots. Grandpa sure was right, said Luffy. Wow, said the little girl, being the only one besides Kobe who hadn't darted for a hiding spot. You are an amazing Oni-san, Urka. An older female voice called in their direction. A larger version of the girl, now identified as Rika, stormed over and grabbed her arm, pulling her towards one of the houses. How many times have I told you not to talk to strangers? The woman lectured her daughter. You could be mistaken as one of their friends and punished like those hoodlums. Mom, he's a good person. Just like Zoro is. Nonsense. Have you been going to the execution grounds again? No, Mom, Rika said sadly. She turned to see Luffy waving her bye before her mom closed the door. This is really bad, said Kobe while spazzing out. If the lieutenant finds out, then he'll probably send a whole squad of Marines after us. And hey, where are you going? To get Zoro. Oh, I see, then you know I should be yelling at you about how insane that is. But I'm not. Maybe you're just getting used to it, Luffy said, and walked off. But I don't want to get used to it. That'd mean I'm becoming as crazy as everyone else. The pink-haired boy sighed out and chazzed after his friend. At the tallest point of the ugliest building ever designed sat the one man on the whole island with a bigger ego than Helmeppo. His father. I am great, the man said simply. His voice was deep and gruff, the sole other occupant of the room. The lone Marine who drew the short straw saluted and thoroughly agreed with the vain madman. Absolutely, sir. They should make you an admiral, sir. You do mean Fleet Admiral, right? He stated. Oh yes, sir. Fleet Admiral, sir. The Marine gulped. Not to be the bearer of bad news, sir, but lately the offerings from the town have been decreasing, finished Morgan. Yes, sir. The kiss-up said, eyeing the door and weighing his odds. With all the new laws you've been implementing, as of late, the people can no longer afford to give as much for the offerings. They can only give so much, sir. No? Morgan corrected. It's not a matter of finance. It's a matter of respect. They don't respect me. Seconds later, Helmeppo burst into the room, his eyes ablaze with anger. He certainly had a lot of visitors today. All of them, of course, being unwanted. The girl wasn't so bad, but this straw-hatted guy didn't seem to understand the word no. I told you I'm not joining your stupid crew, the weakened swordsman said. My name is Luffy, the younger teen said, ignorant to Zoro's annoyance. And when I untie you, then you'll join my crew, okay? What part of no don't you get? Besides, I already have things I need to do. And one of those things doesn't involve me being a criminal. Everyone already thinks you are, Luffy pointed out. So I don't care what they think. I've never done anything wrong before, and I never will. I refuse to be a pirate. Luffy humphed and crossed his arms. I don't care. You're joining my crew, and that's that. Don't decide for yourself. By the way, I heard you use a katana. So where is it? Luffy asked. Zoro glared at him for a second. That overstuffed twerp took it from me when they tied me up. It's something I value second only to my life as well. Sounds like a great treasure. Oh, I have an idea. I'll find a helmet head and get your sword back for you. Zoro was genuinely surprised at this act of charity. You'd really do that for me? Luffy nodded. Aha. His expression changed to sly. Of course I'll only do that if you agree to join my crew. That's dirty. Luffy just grinned. I'm a pirate. That's how I do business. He then ran off towards the base. Now you may be wondering, Why is it so easy for children to get in the grounds of a restricted military base? Well, the answers are rather simple. You see, most of the Navy platoons stationed there had been busy with a task that Morgan had deemed the utmost importance. One that required nearly every available officer to be elsewhere. He was having a 20-foot statue of himself raised today. Morgan watched from the comfort of an armchair he had brought to the roof as, in a reserve of Gulliver's Travels, his men pulled at rope binding his giant statue to raise it up to its feet. Beside him, his indignant son was yelling at him. Why haven't you taken care of that blasted straw hat who had the nerve to hit me? Not even you've hit me before. Morgan turned to his son and gazed at the disappointment passively. Do you know why I've never hit you before? Helmeppo was confused at the question, but answered. Because I'm your Belovo. Wrong. Wham. The boy was sent to the roof when his father aimed the blunt side of his weapon in his jaw. Morgan stood up and looked down past his nose at his son, which was a long way to look down. Backhand Morgan was an enormous man with short white blonde hair and was as tanned as his son was pale. Taller than most by about a head, and bulging with muscles that weren't hidden by his Marine officer's jacket, since the sleeves had been removed. It was entirely possible that he chose the tower's ugly color scheme, since he was wearing pants with the same pattern, as well as a black V-cut dress shirt. Of course, you typically look past those features when you saw the fact that he had a steel jaw in place of a normal one, and a big-ass axe in place of his hand, which was big enough to cleave a man in half. The axe actually looked to be embedded in his arm, the way the point of his elbow jutted out like half a foot from the joint, and screws ran the length of his arm. He reached down with one good hand, and wrapped a massive fist around his whimpering son's face. I've never hit you because you're a worthless little bastard who isn't worth the effort to hit. He squeezed harder. You're not the great one here, you little worm. I'm Axe, and Morgan. He dropped his son to the ground panting, turning himself back to face his statue. Now then. I heard a rumor about a little girl who sneaked into the execution site. That brat, said Helmeppo, rubbing his jaw. Yeah, I already see. Did you execute her? Morgan glared at his son. Both his son and the collective men gaped at the man's exclamation. Surely he wasn't serious. Of course not. She's only a kid. Just needed a telling, Helmeppo said. Morgan grunted and spun to face one of his men. You go to town and kill that brat. She broke the law and has to suffer the consequences. Sir? The Marine questioned. And since the law says anyone associated with a criminal is automatically faced with the same punishment, execute her family as well. I refuse. She's just a little girl. The other men backed away. Morgan's focused completely on the man. What was that, Captain? Remember that you being a lower rank means you have no right to refuse my order. Now go to town and kill them. Never. The Marine captain said without hesitation. So Morgan killed him without hesitation. He cleaved a massive bloody wound through the man's back and out his front, making sure he'd never get up again. Morgan grinned at the horror on the faces of all present, satisfied with their fear. With this arm I was able to rise above the rest and become a lieutenant commander. I am the highest officer at this base. I am the greatest one here. If I told you to execute the entire town for treason, you would do so without a moment's notice. Is that understood? Is that understood? He yelled and raised his axe to glint in the sun. Sir, yes sir. Satisfied with his minion's response, the maniac turned to his 20-foot ego extension. This statue is a symbol of my power. Finished after years upon years of work to stand at the highest point over this town, casting my shadow over it to make sure they never forget who is in charge here. Meanwhile, back on the ground, Luffy was quite surprised to see not a single Marine. He wasn't too worried about the execution grounds, since Sora was securely tied by, but nobody was guarding the front doors. That was just weird. He put his hand to his brow and scouted for anyone at all before spotting something moving on the roof. Looks like someone's up there, said Luffy, black smoke rising from him. Now to just get myself up to them. Back on the roof, Morgan barked out commands to raise his statue quickly. Unfortunately for one Marine pulling on the rope tied around the Admiral's right arm, the statue was placed in a way that lifting it up caused it to smack into the stairhouse, lightly chipping a few of the commander's fingers. Morgan sputtered. Did you just damage my statue? The Marine swallowed and cringed. Sorry, Lieutenant Morgan. I was careless. I'll show you careless, shouted the amputee and swung his axe hand at the Marine. The Marine, in a bid to stay alive, let go of the rope just as Morgan's blade of death passed over him. Now bearing an unexpected extra weight, the other Marines holding the arm weren't able to hold on and let go as the rope burned their fingers. Just as they scrambled to pull a statue back up before the lieutenant could get any angrier, a thick darkness shot up onto the roof, spreading like a virus, lapping at their feet like water, only much colder. Morgan started only to be interrupted by another, much louder voice. Way-ho. Suddenly everything it touched started to feel an enormous pressure on them. Marines with their feet bathed in it yelled, as it was like their shoes were rapidly shrinking with their feet inside them. Bodies were being dragged away from their positions towards the center of the rooftop. Cracks started to appear on all tiles, and some even got pulled out to join the men in the roof center. Then to Morgan horror lines appeared all over his statue, as it was being slowly dragged back and up, as though it were aging centuries in seconds. Not my statue, he pleaded, but it was too late. Marines could no longer keep their footing, and jumped from their positions to try fruitlessly to pull their feet out, letting the statue go just as something came rocketing up, and somersaulting, landing in front of the falling statue right before it snapped in half with a reverberating crack. There were tears all around for the Marines. Morgan oddly enough stood like a statue, his good hand reaching out to where the whole statue used to be, as if to call it back to him, tears brimming in his eyes. The others were no less selfish in their sadness. The commander was gonna kill them, and with their feet feeling as though they'd been held in vices, they didn't think they could get very far before he attacked them like a berserk animal. The darkness receded back into Luffy just as he landed. Looking back at the damage he had caused to the clearly expensive statue, then to the men on the ground rubbing their aching legs. He scratched the back of his head and grinned sheepishly. Just as the top half of the statue hit the ground and shattered into 1,000 pieces. Ops. Sorry about that. I'm not too good if I can't see where I'm going. His statue. His beautiful, beautiful statue. Get him? I want him dead. Aye, sir. Old Meppo recovered from his own shock to point out something his dad most likely still didn't care about. That's him. That's the one that hit me. I told you he was no good. Helmet hair. Luffy said before grabbing onto the front of the skinny teen's arm and dragged him to the stairs. I've been looking for you. After him, Morgan shouted, sending several of his men after the two. When just as he was about to follow after, spotted something done on the ground. Sir, another person entered the yard. It looks like they're untying Zoro. Morgan grit his teeth under his iron mask. Kill him. I won't stand any more insubordination. Aye, sir, said the Marine reluctantly, and took aim with his flintlock. What are you doing? They'll kill you on the spot if they catch you, said Zoro to the bespectacled boy untying his restraints. You haven't done anything wrong. You're only here because you stood up for someone. If I want to be a great Marine someday, then I have to show the same determination that Luffy does in wanting to be Pirate King. Pirate King? You can't be serious. Haha. I know. I thought he was just being stupid when he told me. But he's really planning on. Bang. Time seemed to slow down. It didn't hurt really, more like an itch that was spreading through a very specific part of him. Followed by a much quicker numbness. Kobe didn't even feel himself falling back, see the look on Zoro's face, or wetness spreading across his skin. All he saw was a creeping blackness like Luffy's powers covering his vision. Knowing what it meant, typical. Then, he thought no more. That would be a nice and dramatic ending. Sadly, I've been shot. I'm bleeding. I'm gonna die. The former cabin boy screamed while clutching his shoulder. While this was going on, Luffy was dragging the hapless Meppo through the base like a child dragging a doll, causing enormous friction burns up the idiot's back. Okay, helmet head. Tell me where Zoro's katana is. Ow, okay. Just stop dragging me. The straw-hatted boy stopped abruptly and raised him by his collar, sobbing and sweating like a coward. They're in my room. We're past it a while ago. Whack. Why didn't you say so earlier? You didn't say why you were dragging me. Oh right. Freeze. 3 Marines called out behind the two. Put your hands over your heads. Luffy grinned. I've got a better idea. The world went black. You have to leave. They'll kill you if you're seen here, said Zoro to Kobe, who despite the bullet in his shoulder and the red liquid pouring from the wound from effort, was still unbinding the taller man from the post. And they'll kill you if you stay here, Kobe replied. That caught the swordsman's attention. What are you talking about? That kid said if I stay here for a month they'll untie me. He was lying. That's why Luffy came back here. You're getting executed in 3 days. Zoro just stared at the boy, wide-eyed in shock. The Navy won't just let you off the hook. That's why I have to get you free so you can help Luffy. I won't force you to join him. But together we all might be able to escape this town. You're not going anywhere. Or not, Kobe said miserably. Meanwhile, Luffy had made it to the Helmeppo room, which was surprisingly Spartan given the boy's personality. In the corner was the prize Luffy sought. The only problem was it was 3 times 3. Which ones are Zoro's? Hey, you took it from him, so which one is it? Helmeppo foamed in response. Aw man, you fainted. I might just have to take all of them, he said, dropping his hostage like a potato sack, and grabbed the 3 weapons under his arm, making a break for the door when he heard something from outside. Checking through the window, he saw that axe-handed guy barking orders at Marines who were aiming rifles at Kobe and Zoro. You 3 have caused me a lot of grief, said Morgan in a calm but powerful tone. If I'm to keep my hold on this town complete, then I can't have bugs like you around. First you 2, then I'll take care of that idiot who broke my statue. Men, ready. The grunts in front of them cocked the hammer of their guns. Aim. The guns were lowered and pointed right at the 2. Ordinarily Zoro wasn't big on fear. He knew he could take anybody in a straight-up fight. Unfortunately, this wasn't a straight-up fight. He was tied down and about to be shot, with a very big guarantee that he won't live past the next 10 seconds. This couldn't be the end. He still had so much to accomplish. He couldn't die until he fulfilled his promise. Oh, I'm sorry. There was supposed to be a flashback there explaining the promise Zoro made to his dead friend to be the greatest swordsman in the world, well, a more elaborate one than that at least. Let's just move on with the story. I am not lazy. So anyway, Kobe and Zoro stared down the Marines, not believing it would end this soon. Their dreams over before they started. Fire! Morgan yelled. The Marines pulled the triggers. The last sound the two would ever likely hear. The balls of metal flew at them, and, as they were halfway to their targets, they met a third target. Luffy, billowing massive amounts of fire, less smoke reaching to the heavens, was in front of his two friends. The bullets trapped in the infinite vacuum of his powers. Zoro's sword stashed under his arms. It's no use, said Luffy with a confident grin. The Marines fell onto their rears, and backed away in shock. Zoro's eyes were no longer hidden in the shadow of his bandana from being so wide. Axe hand settled for having his eyes pop out into the shape of eggs. What are you? Asked Zoro in a breathless voice. Luffy gave him a cocky grin. The man who's going to be the Pirate King. He hefted the swords into view of his hopeful first mate. You never told me what it looked like, so which one's yours? Zoro looked the swords over for a moment. They all are. I'm a Santoria user, so I use all three blades. Now Luffy and Kobe had a fair number of questions about that. Namely, how he managed to use all three at once without looking stupid. That, however, is something better left unsaid for the moment. So since you're technically a criminal now, what's to say you join my crew? Unless you'd rather I didn't block the shots. Zoro snorted. I don't know what the hell you are. But you have my point. If I'm already a criminal, then I may as well go all the way. And be a pirate. Luffy whooped for joy. He now had his first crewmate. Meanwhile, the Marines were standing around like idiots, staring at the boy who was billowing what could only be called blackness from his body. What happened to the bullets? They fired their guns. A wall of inky darkness appeared in the way, taking in the metal balls. Then the boy appeared from inside it. Morgan understood. No doubt. That kid must have eaten a devil fruit. And a powerful one at that. That didn't settle his men's fears any. Though it didn't make them run, as most would. They were caught between a rock and a hard place with their ill-tempered boss and this super-powered freak. Well, what are you waiting for? If the bullet doesn't work, then cut him down. The lieutenant yelled. The ensigns nodded and unsheathed their blades, taking advantage of the boy being so focused on untying his new friend, which he looked to be having difficulty with. Hey, I got one, he cheered, just as rain of steel descended on his back. The next one to move dies. To answer the question the two younger boys thought earlier, the one about how Zoro could use 3 blades without looking stupid, the answer was simple. He didn't. He blocked 6 blades with 3. 2 with a sword in each hand and 1 clenched between his teeth. Yeah, not stupid looking at all. Okay, smokestack, he said, referring to Luffy. Either way, after today I'm going to be a wanted man, so now it doesn't matter if I'm a pirate or not. But that doesn't mean I don't have my own goals. Luffy listened intently. I'm going to be the world's best swordsman. Nothing else matters to me. I'll go with you, but if you do anything that hinders my dream, I'll slice you open. Understand? Luffy could only smile in response. Are you kidding? I wouldn't want any less from someone on the crew of the Pirate King. Ha. Well said. Of course, there was still the matter of the Marines bearing down on them. So since we haven't heard from Morgan in a while, why are you just standing around? Kill them, yelled. Luffy grinned wide and flung his arms forward. The darkness coming from him expanded, bulging outwards to look like a mushroom. Then he gave a cry of release. 4 forms shot out of the darkness with the speed of cannon fire, bowling over the sword-wielding my Navy men and freeing Zoro from his precarious position. Morgan couldn't believe what he saw. Not only were his men being taken down, they looked to have been taken down by his other men. 4 new bodies lay on the field where there should have only been 6. 3 were ensigns, and the other was his onion-haired son. That was amazing, Luffy. Kobe cheered, grateful for not having his career ended before it started. What the hell are you? Questioned Zoro. Luffy gave him his ever-present grin and flared with powers a little more, making the blackness writhing around his form dance angrily. I am a dark man, he said. A darkness man. Cowardly one Marine. We couldn't beat one of them, let alone both. Another said. We have to run away. Traitors. The complaining and cowering went silent as Axe and Morgan himself moved through the crowd of failed men, too disgusted with them to even meet their eyes. When he was directly in front of the crowd, he turned his head to the side slightly to address them. Whoever said those things, blow your fucking brains out. Silence. I said it. Luffy, Kobe, and Zoro couldn't believe their eyes when they saw that the Marines really were planning to go through with it, lifting their guns to their heads and letting tears fall. Luffy, shouted Kobe. I know. The dark boy replied and darted at the true source of all the chaos. Wham! Morgan grunted in pain as Luffy's surprisingly powerful fist came in contact with his axe arm. Then with strength bellying, his appearance forced the larger man back quite a few feet to come to a skidding halt. If you're gonna execute anyone today, then you better make it for me. That attack did the trick. The Marines' guns now hung loosely in the hands at the sight of someone actually fighting the feared lieutenant. How dare you? Who do you think you are? Thinking you can face the great Lieutenant Axeman Morgan? Morgan said, throwing off his jacket and charging Luffy like a mat bull. Name's Luffy. Nice to meet you. Shut up. The massive man screamed and flung his arm out in a sweeping arc at the boy. If Luffy hadn't jumped at the last second, he'd have been cleaved in two. The blow was enormously powerful, missing Luffy completely, but the pressure of it was strong enough to slice through an entire link fence like a hot knife through butter and demolish a concrete wall without being anywhere near it. Luffy, now in midair, took this opportunity to slam both feet into Morgan's face and springboard off it, landing a safe distance away. That attack sure was fast, he commented. I wasn't prepared for something that big to be so quick. Lifting himself off the ground, Morgan charged the boy again, grabbing the long protrusion from his elbow and lifting his arm high over his head. Die! He screamed and brought his arm down on Luffy's head. The sound of people drawing their breath came, as loud as anything you could imagine, as the lieutenant's massive weapon arm embedded itself in Luffy's head. Dread filled the Marines, as they realized that their one glimmer of hope in so many years had faded into a fountain of blood. Except there was no blood. Gotcha. Hearts soared, as they realized, as if by some miracle, the boy was not dead. They didn't know how he should have been twins by now, but they were complaining about it. Morgan found he could not move his arm. He pulled and pulled for all his self-believed worth to free himself. The axe wouldn't budge. This is the arm you used to make people fear you, isn't it? Luffy said quietly so no one but the crook Marine would hear his dark tone. Let's see how you do without it. He felt movement, but not the way he wanted. His axe was being pulled in, buckling and cracking, as the blade thrice as wide as the Loja user's head compacted to be pulled into the darkness. Morgan cried out in an octave one shouldn't be able to reach after puberty, when a particularly violent jerk on his part twisted his arm in a way it shouldn't go. Those watching watched in morbid fascination, as the large point in the commander's arm started to go soft. The axe handle that had once occupied it was being pulled out roughly, saved only by the bolts that secured the weapon, which were already starting to be pulled, as well. Those few inches of scraping and splintering felt like an eternity to Morgan before the axe had buckled, crumpled, and was competently pulled into the darkness. Morgan felt a tightness clench around the stump of his hand, then nothing. The lieutenant once more found himself lying flat on his back. The blade of his axe now gone, and all that remained was a splintered handle, and a crushed metal stump that looked like it was torn as easily as aluminium foil. The boy picked him up by the front of his shirt, an inky fist poised at his face. Wait! A voice yelled out. Luffy didn't listen. Wham! Morgan's jaw cover buckled under the force of the punch. He was sent clear across the courtyard, crashing into and through the warning sign he'd put up, and into another chain link fence where he hovered for a moment, and finally crashed back to the ground. Out of it. I told you to wait. Helmeppo had managed to revive, albeit covered in large wounds. A big black eye, busted lip, and probably had more blood on him than in him at this point. He managed to get a hold of Kobe and hold a pistol to his head while using the boy as a shield. Don't anyone move, he screamed out, not even trying to hide the fear in his voice. Anyone come near me, and I'll blow this guy's head off. I'm leaving. Helmeppo's words were only background noise. The world faded out till the only ones left were Kobe and Luffy, staring into each other's eyes with such intensity that you might think they were looking into the other's soul. Luffy, take this guy down, Kobe yelled to his friend. What? Helmeppo in surprise. Shut up or I'll kill you. Luffy smiled, raising a finger in the direction of the two, his hand giving off the faintest wisp of smoke. Helmeppo clung to Kobe tighter, cocking the flintlock. Don't be stupid. You do that again, and you'll hurt your friend. That's why I'm doing this. Yami-Yami. Helmeppo squeezed the trigger. Bullet. From out of his finger fired a sphere of darkness, no bigger than buckshot, flying at the helmet-headed idiot faster than any man-made projectile, and striking Helmeppo right in the shoulder before he could fully pull the trigger. The commander's son screamed in pain, as the bullet of pure gravity tore through his arm, its intense gravitational powers pulling at his insides hard enough to tear tissue from tissue, forcing him to drop the gun where it discharged into the ground harmlessly. The force of the dark shot sent Helmeppo flying back to land in a heap. No problem, said Luffy, holding his finger like a gun. Instead of looking relieved, Kobe still looked scared, looking over Luffy's shoulder. Watch out. Morgan had taken advantage of everyone concentrating on his son, so sneak up on Luffy, pulling out a knife he kept secured to himself for emergencies to cut the boy's head in two like he should have done before. It never came. Before the officer could even bring the knife down, Zoro was already behind him, his three blades wet before the giant man could even fall. Nice one, Zoro, complimented Luffy. Zoro nodded since he couldn't smile with a sword in his mouth. Anytime, Captain. Yet he could still talk coherently. Weird. Why you defeated the lieutenant, stuttered a beyond shocked Marine who had been watching from a distance. The rest of the base's forces had managed to gather a while ago, but had not dared interfere with the fight. Zoro gripped the swords in his hands that much tighter. You want to take us in? Come and get us. The Marines all looked at each other, conversing without words, before everyone reached a decision. Yes, we're free. Morgan's reign of terror is over. They threw their unloaded guns into the air, Swords clattered to the ground as the normally strict and serious Marines danced and sang like pirates in celebration. They feared the commander had been taken down. The pirates and soon-to-be Marine watched the celebration. Surprise was the furthest thing from their minds. I knew they didn't like how Morgan acted, said Zoro. Yeah. This is what you get when pirates or Marines treat their men like dirt, added Luffy. Kobe didn't say anything. His beliefs in the standings of the Navy and pirates in the world had taken a royal pounding over the last few days. Maybe the world wasn't as black and white as the government would have you think. He didn't put much more thought into that though. Zoro collapsing, taking priority, and all. The very contented and normally scary man leaned back in his chair after filling his belly to bursting. Very happy to have ended his 9-day fast. That hits the spot. If I didn't eat anything any longer I swear I'd have starved to death. Then you were just bluffing when you said you'd survive a month, said Luffy while swallowing the last of his 2 plates of food. Don't push it, Luffy. Zoro started his ignorant captain down. Sorry to be imposing on you like this. Apologized the only non-pirate out of the 3. Speaking of course to Rika's mother who had offered to feed them, as thanks. She just waved him off. Nonsense. You saved the town after all. Just ask those outside. That was true. It looked like everyone in town was waiting to see the gallant heroes who had taken down Morgan and Homepo, going as far as to press their faces against the windows to get a better look. Watching the trio with stars in their eyes. Yeah. You're all so strong, chirped Rika. Happier than she had been in a long time. That's nothing. I'm gonna get even stronger later. Speaking of later, what are your plans exactly? We can't just float about the ocean after all, Zoro commented. Snort, well that's a dumb question. I'm heading to the Grand Line. Kobe's chair clattered against the floor when he took to his feet, slamming for palms on the table. Are you still talking about that? I've already told you how bad an idea that is. The strongest pirates in the world gather there. Must die days after they reach it. Grand Line, huh? Yeah, I figured if you're aiming for the top you'd want to go there, said Zoro. Nobody's listening to me, thought Kobe while 2 little streams rolled down his cheeks. Sigh, look, even though I'm not going with you I'm still worried about you guys. Because even though we just met. Luffy knew what he was saying. We'll always be friends, Kobe. Really? Not. The lump rose in his throat. A sob. Wow. I've never had friends before. No one would ever stand up for me. But his hands clenched and a confident grin spread across his face. Now thanks to you, I'm going to live my dream. Luffy nodded. Right. Of course it may be difficult joining the Navy, being a pirate, and all. What do you mean? I'm not a pirate. No? Doesn't being a cabin boy on Alvida's ship count? Oh? Zoro added his 2 beery. The Marines are great at gathering info on people. If they find out you've worked on a pirate ship, forced or not, they'll arrest you. Anyone associated with known pirates in any way will be charged with aiding in piracy, regardless of the nature of association. That was one of the big laws Kobe had memorized. If they found out he'd been a pirate crew member, he could be looking at a lengthy prison sentence even if he was forced. Knock knock. Come in, said Rika's mother. The door opened up, and much to Kobe's encroaching horror, the acting Marine commander stepped in. Faceless Marines in their dozens standing just outside behind him. Sorry to be so abrupt. However, given that you so readily attacked a known Marine officer, we were wondering if you were really pirates. Well, me and Zoro are, if that's what you mean, Luffy said without caution or worry. I see. The Marine said evenly. Well, this brings us to a conundrum. Even though you are pirates, you saved us, for which we are grateful. However, as Marines we can't allow you to stay in this town any longer. So it is my duty to ask you to leave, because we will be reporting today's incident to headquarters. The din of the townsfolk outside was deafening. People were outraged at the Marines at treating their saviors so callously. Luffy understood though. If they wanted to get rid of Morgan they needed to report to Marineford about everything that happened today. It wouldn't be in the town's interests if they were seen being friendly with pirates. Alright. Come on Zoro, let's go. Thank you for the food, ladies. The 2 got up from the table, ignoring the sad faces of all the townspeople watching from near and far, and headed for the door. Passing Kobe, as if he wasn't there. Hey wait. The Marine said, noticing the pink-haired boy wasn't following them. Aren't you with him? It was the hardest question Kobe had ever been asked. Does say yes, and destroy his dreams. Or say no, and leave the only friends he's ever had. We'll always be friends, Kobe. I'm not with them. The officer stared down at the boy. His statement is a tad too loud not to be suspicious. Is this true? The Marine asked Luffy. Well, he's not with us. But I know what this guy used to do. Luffy. What are you doing? Kobe broke out into a sweat. Luffy hefted his arms to his sides to represent great girth. You see, he used to go with this fat pirate. I think her name was Albiba or something. Stop, he whispered. If Luffy said any more they'd never let him fulfill his dream. He looked at the officer who, much to his horror, seemed to be absorbing everything. Luffy walked right up to Kobe, finger almost touching his forehead. Yeah, a fat ugly crone. I heard him say he'd been with her for tea. Shut up, whack. He didn't know what happened. One second he was shaking in fear, the next he was seeing red, his fist hurt, and Luffy was rubbing a bruising cheek. Why you? Luffy retaliated with a punch of his own to Kobe's jaw. The Marine was, as Luffy beat the snot out of Kobe, until the boy collapsed on the floor, and Luffy's next punch was being held back by him. That's enough. It's now painfully clear that he's not associated with you. Now leave this town now. He pointed out the door. A message which Luffy and Zoro gladly took. The bespectacled boy knew why his friend did it. That only made him feel worse. He'd never done anything helpful. This entire journey he'd done nothing but played the helpless tag-along, the one that needs rescuing. If he ever wanted to see Luffy again, that needed to change. He pushed himself up, getting the captain's attention. He straightened himself up, and then threw his head back down. Please sir. Let me join the Navy. It doesn't matter what it is, I just want to join. He could feel the weight of dozens of eyes on him. He had a dream like this once. Except it was night, and he was in his underwear. I don't trust him sir, said one Marine. He could be a pirate spy. Okay, now this situation was worse than the dream. No? He found himself shouting. It's my dream to be a Marine. The distrustful Marine backed away from the conviction in the boy's voice. The steel and determination were evident for all to see. The captain nodded and headed for the door. Don't think we don't know about you, Alvida pirate cabin boy. What? But I will still allow you to join. Don't make me regret this decision. Kobe didn't hear the man after the but. The angel's trumpeting in his ear made it a touch hard too. That was a nice thing to do, Captain, said Zoro while trying to make himself comfortable in this small dinghy. Hey, he promised that he'd be an admiral by the time I'm Pirate King. I'm just making sure that happens. Luffy. The two turned to see Kobe standing there, arm in a sling, and missing a front tooth. Maybe I hit him hard, Luffy thought. The look from Zoro confirmed that. Kobe caught his breath, then stood rigid and brought his palm to his brow. Thank you for everything. We will definitely meet again. Yeah, cheered Luffy. Well, look at that. Never seen a Marine salute a pirate before. This might just be an interesting adventure after all, said Zoro. Of course he meant the 20-odd actual Marines standing behind the initiate, bidding their final farewells along with cheering townsfolk to their heroes. You have some interesting friends, boy, said the commander, saluting the pirates alongside him. Kobe nodded, crying and smiling at the same time. So a brave adventurer set off, leaving old friends by comparison and gaining a new one. Luffy sails for the next island to find adventure, treasure, and hopefully a new crew member for their journey to the Grand Line. Now then, what are the chances that two muscle-brained idiots in a 10-by-3-foot boat with all the directional sense of Ryoga frickin' Hibiki and no provisions can find an island before they starve? I thought so. Thanks for watching my video. See you next time. Till then, sayonara.